You know those stories that are just too weird to be true? The ones that get passed around as spooky urban legends? Here we talk about all kinds of strange phenomena, cryptids, mythical creatures, urban legends. But what happens when the legend is real? What happens when the unbelievable story turns out to have a terrifying amount of truth to it? Today, we're looking at exactly that. These are the stories that sound completely made up, but are shockingly real, and we're starting the list strong. Starting with an unfortunate tale, we have the story of Garry Hoy. So, Garry Hoy was a 38-year-old lawyer at a big firm in Toronto. It's back in 1993. His office was in one of those huge downtown skyscrapers, the Toronto Dominion Centre. And apparently, this guy was super proud of how well-built the building was. He also had a background in engineering, which maybe explains why he was so obsessed with it. He had this party trick that was, a little insane. To show people how strong the windows were, he would literally run at them full speed and just bounce off. He'd done it a bunch of times before for his coworkers, like it was no big deal. So on July 9th, 1993, the firm is having this party for a bunch of new legal interns. Garry decides, hey, this is the perfect time to impress the new kids. He's in a conference room on the 24th floor, gets a running start, and slams his body into the glass. And just like always, he just bounces right off. The glass is fine. The students are probably freaking out a little bit. But for some reason that nobody will ever understand, he decides to do it again. Maybe he didn't get enough of a reaction the first time, I don't know. He backs up, takes another running charge at the exact same window. And this time the entire window pane pops out of the frame. To the horror of everyone watching, Garry Hoy fell 24 stories to his death. And I'm going to quickly address the irony here because this is the craziest part. He was kind of right. The glass itself never broke. It was the window frame that failed from being hit twice in the same spot. A building engineer later basically said no building code on Earth is designed for a 160-pound guy to use it as a battering ram. His death was ruled a death by misadventure, and it instantly became a famous urban legend. It's been on Mythbusters, 1,000 Ways to Die, and he even got a Darwin Award for it. It was a huge traumatic event for the law firm, and while there were other business problems, some people say the shock from Hoy's death contributed to the firm closing down a few years later. Following that, we have an urban legend known as the Toxic Lady, and this one is just baffling. This next entry is something that was very real. I'm sure a lot of people wish it wasn't. On February 19th, 1994, a 31-year-old woman named Gloria Ramirez was rushed to an ER in California. She had late-stage cervical cancer and was really sick, fast heartbeat, couldn't breathe. The doctors and nurses start working on her, and immediately things get weird. They notice this weird, oily sheen on her skin, and this fruity, garlic-like smell coming from her mouth. A nurse draws her blood, and it gets even stranger. The blood smells like ammonia, and there are these little manna-colored particles floating in it. Then the nurse who drew the blood just faints. A few minutes later, a doctor feels sick and collapses.
Oh.
Then a third person faints, before they knew what was happening. 23 of the 37 people in the ER started having symptoms they couldn't breathe. They had muscle spasms. They were passing out. 5 of them ended up hospitalized. The hospital declared a full-on emergency, evacuated the entire ER into the parking lot, and a hazmat team came in. A few people in protective suits tried to save Gloria, but she died pretty quickly from kidney failure. So the big question was, what the hell just happened? How does a person basically emit toxic fumes that can take down an entire ER staff? The story blew up, calling her the Toxic Lady, and sparked a huge investigation. The first theory was just mass hysteria-like. One person fainted, and the stress made everyone else feel sick. But that got thrown out, especially by one of the doctors, Julie Gerchinsky, who was hit the hardest. She was in the ICU for 2 weeks and got long-term health problems from it. This was not in her head. The main scientific theory, and this is wild, came from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. They figured out that Gloria might have been using a gel called DMSO as a home remedy for her cancer pain. The theory goes that when paramedics gave her oxygen, it started a chemical reaction. The DMSO in her system turned into something else, and then when they used the defibrillator on her, the electric shocks turned that into dimethyl sulfate, which is an extremely toxic, poisonous gas. That could definitely explain what happened to the staff. But here's the catch. It's never been 100% proven. The family has always said that's not what happened and that the hospital was just trying to cover up something they did wrong. Her body was too decomposed by the time an independent autopsy could be done. The mystery of the toxic lady is still officially unsolved. From a hospital mystery, we travel to the back roads of rural Pennsylvania, where for decades, teenagers and thrill seekers went looking for a monster they called the Green Man, or Charlie No-Face. The real story isn't about a monster at all, which is honestly sad. The legend of the Green Man is a classic ghost story in western Pennsylvania. Teenagers would dare each other to drive down this one specific road at night to try and spot a faceless monster that supposedly glowed green. They called him Charlie No-Face. But this wasn't a ghost, or a demon, or a monster. He was a real guy named Raymond Robinson. Ray was born in 1910 and had a normal life until he was 8. In 1919, he was trying to look at a bird's nest and accidentally touched a high-voltage power line. The accident was absolutely horrific. He lost his eyes, his nose, and an arm, and was severely disfigured. It's a miracle he survived it all. Because of how he looked, Ray mostly stayed inside during the day to avoid scaring people. Spent his time with family, making wallets and doormats to sell. But at night, he liked to get some fresh air. So he would go for these long walks on a quiet road near his house, using a stick to guide himself. And that's how the legend started. People driving by would see this lonely figure walking in the dark. Soon, the stories began to spread, and teenagers started driving out there on purpose to find him and scare themselves. The name Charlie No-Face was just a cruel description of his injuries. The Green Man name probably came from his skin looking greenish in their headlights. The reality was, if people actually stopped and talked to him, they'd find a really nice guy. He'd trade a conversation or a picture for some beer or cigarettes. He was a huge baseball fan and knew all the stats, but a lot of people were just cruel. They'd taunt him, and he even got hit by cars more than once, but he kept doing his walks. Raymond Robinson died in 1985 when he was 74. Over time, the true story of this poor guy who just wanted to take a walk in peace got completely twisted into a boogeyman story. It's a pretty powerful reminder of how a real person's tragic life can get warped into a monster legend. The leaping lawyer, the toxic lady, and the Green Man. 3 stories that feel like they were made up to tell around a campfire, but they're all true. These legends stick around because they tap into real fears and freak accidents, things science can't explain, and fear of people who are different. But if you did make it to this part of the video, comment which story you found the most shocking. Thank you guys so much for watching this video about creepy urban legends that turned out to be true.